Rishi Sunak's misery has deepened. It's gone to new depths as three separate polls found the Tories are on track for their worst ever result. He could even lose his own seat. This is not a good look for a Prime Minister. Huge projections by YouGov, Savanta and More in Common, conducted using the MRP technique, gave a bleak picture of the Prime Minister's prospects. YouGov suggested the Tories face being reduced to 108 seats, which would be the worst performance in their 200-year history. Now let's talk on this to the Director of Political Analytics with YouGov. That's Patrick English. Patrick, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Very well. Nice to have you with us. I mean, firstly, what is the MRP technique? It sounds very technical and very important.
It is certainly very technical. So MRP stands for multiple regression or multi-level regression and post-stratification, which I understand gives no further indication as to what it is. But essentially, it's a large statistical model run on some very big computers that takes in huge amounts of survey data. You know, we're talking tens of thousands of interviews that are conducted, matches that to background information about respondents, such as how they voted last time, their social demographic information, where they live, and then uses all of that information to project over every single British constituency to give an implication, a projection as to how they are going to vote at the next general election.
So this is
big data technique.
Would it be fair to say, sort of in layman's terms, that this is a far more astute and reliable technology, a much bigger, more effective and accurate picture?
It ought to be exactly that, yes. What MRP polls can do, the traditional polls cannot do, is tell us what is happening within constituencies. All that data, all that information, all that time we spend with it allows us to give really what we believe are accurate assessments of what is going on from seat to seat. That's completely impossible to do with a standard 2,000-person poll, and it gives us insights as to who is winning at the constituency level. And of course, we know in British elections, it's not really so much about how many votes you have, it's how many votes within each seat you have. That determines the winner, the outcome, and indeed, as we're looking at now, the size of any party's majority. Yeah.
Now, of course, we live in a world where people listen to a lot of echo chambers as well as read a lot of polling. I mean, there was a time years back when people would wait for a poll to come out, and now there's like 115 a day. I noticed some cheeky whatsits in some political parties are sort of publishing their own polls, which are often just one of their followers that did a poll, but they happen to have quite impressive graphics that made it look like something else. I'm sure you guys have noticed that going on as well. Nonetheless, I mean, there are some big pollsters like yourself, you know, that have been around for a long time with good pedigree and very credible results. What's interesting, I think, to a lot of people about this particular poll, Patrick, is that the Conservatives aren't losing to Reform based on this. They're losing to Labour.
Well, under the hood, the story is actually pretty complicated. So what we're seeing is a fragmentation of that 2019 voter coalition for the Conservatives that propelled Boris Johnson into Parliament with a constituency win for every single day of the year. Now, that coalition has just gone and dispersed across all different types of parties. Around a quarter are intending to vote for Reform UK at the minute. Around sort of 10 to 12% intend to vote for the Labour Party. Some have gone to the Liberal Democrats. Some have even gone to the Greens. And really what's happening is that Labour are able to be projected to have a huge majority, 200 seats according to us, on only 40% of the vote share, because the Conservative vote at the constituency level is being eaten into so heavily by Reform UK that Labour really are not having to go great doldrums. They're not really stacking on millions and millions and millions of more votes, but they're being given many more constituency wins by the fact that the Conservative vote around them is just falling to pieces.
So that would explain that. So, and of course, because we are a first past the post system, if this was PR, we'd be telling a whole different story here. But it's not that, which means that, you know, we saw it in 2015 with UKIP, didn't we? They got 4 or 5 million votes, whatever it was, and only one seat. We are likely to be in that place again, according to this.
We absolutely are, yes. At the minute, we're projecting Reform UK are ahead in 5 constituencies across Great Britain, despite having 15% in the poll itself, which is, you know, not a great return in terms of million votes to seats. And certainly the Liberal Democrats are on fewer votes, we believe, across the country, but are looking anything up to around 70 seats at the minute on our projections. And that is the nature of the first past the post system.
Just tell us, and it's not for you, of course, Patrick, to talk about other polling companies, but bearing in mind that the three I mentioned are using the same methodology and technique. Why do they differ quite wildly in some respects between a YouGov poll and a Savanta poll, for example? What is that just about the questions that are asked, or is there something else going on there?
Yeah, I think there are two main reasons why we're seeing such variation. One is that there are different samples going into each. YouGov, here we have our own panel, which we're very privileged to have 1 million people signed up from in the UK. Others will have might have their own panels or might be using other providers. So the sample data which goes into these models isn't the same, and that's probably
Right.
explaining what's going on. As well, though, all the pollsters are sort of saying the same thing. We're all saying we expect Labour to have a huge majority and for the Conservatives to lose at least half of their seats, possibly even more, and be reduced to somewhere around 100. The thing is, this is a big change election. We're expecting big swings. We're expecting that big fragmentation of the Conservative vote. And when that happens, it's difficult for pollsters and even pollsters who use MRP to perhaps grapple with the extent of that change.
Yeah.
A few million votes changing hands here and there, a few percentage points can make a massive difference to the number of seats where the Conservatives win. So I think all of us are selling a similar-ish story. We're just kind of disagreeing a little bit about the extent of that change in what is a huge change election.
Yeah. So this may not be that Labour are getting, I mean, we could even find ourselves in a situation where, in terms of actual votes come July the 4th, that Labour's vote hasn't increased significantly, but the Tories has dropped significantly. Then it's splintered off elsewhere. Hence the reason why I think I'm right in saying that Neil Kinnock got more votes than Tony Blair back in the day. So, but of course it didn't translate into Westminster success, and something similar might be going on here for this election.
Yes, exactly right. As we've kind of discussed already, this is all about what happens at the constituency level. It's all about how many votes you put in the areas you need. And another important point, the thing that we're picking up in our data, and in fact all pollsters who are using MRP are picking up, is that the Labour vote is becoming incredibly efficient. They are actually losing votes in some of their highest support areas, the sort of really high urban density areas, losing to the Greens and some independents and some others. But in those swing seats, those old bellwethers, the Corbys, the Nuneatons, the Ketterings, the Stevenages, the ones that really determine who wins elections, the Labour vote is very, very efficient there. They're piling up votes in the seats they need to take from the Conservatives to be winning. So that's a really important part of the story as well. And another explainer as to how Labour's overall vote share might not go in a huge sort of positive direction come July the 4th, but their seat numbers, we think, certainly will.
Yeah. Patrick, thank you for your time, sir. Patrick English is the Director of Political Analytics over there at YouGov. I think if Reform did get 5 MPs, that I can tell you now, that would be beyond their wildest dreams. It would not only be incredible to see a new party that didn't exist half an hour ago bring 5, possibly 6 MPs into Westminster. That would be extraordinary. But remember, this is about groundwork for reform. Just being in there, being that agitator, being that enticing offer to other Conservatives who don't feel comfortable in their own skin any longer. So that's the start of a whole other story, and that story begins on July the 5th. We will watch with interest. We'll go